So, welcome back, everyone. This is episode 4 of What You Missed, basically, in iPet Go 2. Hello, Armunn.
Hey man, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you?
All good here. Yeah, all good.
Very good.
So here we are, episode 4 of 666. Let's get this started. You have something to say about this
I
apple
do.
divided in two that actually has two seeds on one side and one seed only on the other, huh?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does, which is quite interesting because it's something you see in the Cicada 3301 cipher as well. That one tree has 5 fruits on it, the other only has 3. So you get this sort of interest in absence. I think the reason for that is it's this idea of the Trinity, and it's the idea that one is sort of conflagrative,
Hmm.
or limiting, and the other is more is more of potentiality itself, right? So the
Hmm.
one itself is that of limitlessness, potentiality, and the two is that which divides that, and sort of births it into a duality. I don't know if you have any take upon that alone, that symbol.
Yeah, well, it seems to me interesting that the one that the half that has two seeds is the half that remained with the stem, because the stem wasn't cut. The stem was left whole with two leaves on it. And that was the one that kept two of the seeds. So the seeds weren't cut in half, which means that the apple isn't cut exactly in half if we were to consider that this was a completely symmetrical apple. But symbolically, I think that it's interesting that it's the one that's still connected to the stem that has the two seeds. So one would be perhaps the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and the other one of the tree of life, and the other one the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yes, and also as well, because it's imprecise or incomplete or unfinished, it's this idea of the self-referential paradox of life, that being that it can never complete itself. Otherwise it wouldn't exist. So it has to maintain itself in this sort of an imprecise state, but it looks as though it's cut in half. But of course, upon closer inspection, it's not. What you see is a sort of incomplete, and unequal world as well, right?
Mhm.
Also, you notice that the seeds are coming from the right hand side, which is Hesed, which is that of passion or mercy, uh, that of the masculine as well in Kabbalah, interestingly, which is again of limitation itself. But the LC, there was something I had on that which I found quite interesting, which is you have the LC, which is the Lamed and Samech, and so that would be the equivalent in Hebrew. So Lamed represents an ox goad. It also represents to teach or to direct. Samech represents a support, a prop, or a shield. So altogether, it would be las or less. It could also be lush as well. So you have that idea there too. But the C sound, instead of being a samech, it could also be a zadi, which is a different letter. So if we use that letter zadi for the C sound, which is it's common in transliterating TS or Z sounds from English to Hebrew, like that of Sia, we get a specific Hebrew word, which is litz or lights, which means the scorner, the mocker, or the fool or the jester, the buffoon.
Hmm.
So in the biblical context of the book of Proverbs, the lights is the one who mocks divine wisdom and relies on their own cynical, right-angled, or sort of Masonic, or purely intellectual faculties. Um, and interestingly as well, the Lamed has a value, because Hebrew is an alphanumeric system, of 30. Samech has a value of 60, and the total, of course, is 90. So you have literally the 30, 60, 90. Another thing to mention too is the Zadik, or the Zadi rather, letter, um, is has a value itself of 90. So it also means the fish hook, the hunter, or it can also mean the harvester, interestingly. So this could tie in with the LC itself, which may be an anagram in English of the lunar crescent, which looks like a scythe. Um, so yeah,
Hmm.
there's that connection too.
It could
But
also because before on Bush's dunce hat, we saw the D, and if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. D stands for 500 in Roman numerals, correct?
yes,
Yes. So we would have a reference to 500 there, and LC could be 500 too, because L would be 50 and C 100. Right. So it could be that the conjunction of these two, if you remove the extra zero, let's say, because the two apples could form their two zeros as well, would be 500. And 500 has importance in the book of Revelation, if you remember, which is, I think, the chosen, right? The 500 chosen, or the 500 that were spared, something like that.
I think so. I'd have to check that. I know there's another connection with Revelation because of the 144,000, and that comes later on. In fact, that these scenes that we're going to see, I can't quite recall that. I'd have to look that up.
I might be mistaken. I mean, I'm not a Bible expert, but
Oh, definitely. We know that. We know that. Also, as well, the 369 are effectively the, so again, the 30 of Lamed, the 60 of Samech, and of course the two together, the sum of which um, adds to 90. So the 369 it's effectively the circular numbers. These are really what are looping numbers, right? I think it was called vortex math. It was it alludes to Nikola Tesla and his 369 comments, but it was popularized by an individual called Marco Rodin, and effectively the idea is all the multiples of 369, they
mm,
appear to, if you reduce them down. So, for example, 36 would be reduced down to 3 plus 6 equals 9. So all of it reduces back and loops back to the 369, and they all act in these sort of similar ways. I think 3 reduces back to 6, and 6 reduces back to 3, all of its multiples. And 9, of course, all of its multiples reduce back to itself. So again, if we're looking at the 2 pips and the 1 pip, the 1 pip would be the 9 on the right, which itself is chesed, and the other pip would be the 3 and the 6, which are the more, uh, the numbers of the material world, if you will, right? The material emanations of course, the 9, which is the sort of ascended number. The 6 and the 9 are interesting too, regarding Cancer, Karkinos, and also the idea of the heliacal, or spiraling descent of the 6, and the spiraling ascent of the 9 if you stack them on top of one another.
mhm.
Um, so you've got all of these connections as well.
Well, I'm just looking up here, and no, it's not the 500 that survived. It's 500 years of silence, and also that is symbolized by the 500 days of fasting from Daniel. So it could be the period of time that God, in the sense, is absent, right? That man is left to its own device. Of course, we're talking about the mythical narrative here, but it could be that. I knew that 500. I had connected 500 somehow to the Bible, but I thought it was Revelations, but no. So would that
Well, I
hold
think I
any?
think you're I think you're right. You actually see that if the tendrils come growing out rhizomatically from um, the right, which is of God, it appears the one, and the left, which is of the material or of the two. Um, those are connecting together. The stems themselves, emerging from the pips may symbolize the thread of time itself,
Mm.
and it
Mm.
is constantly seeking its coincidentia oppositorum so it can then continue on and bloom once more. And as you see here, the lotus grows from the swamp. It grows from, you know, the the sort of mire of chaos and the expenditure of excess. And interestingly, we're going to get to a lot of even these ideas with the glaciers, right? They have the idea of the polar ice caps are melting, right? Or the fossil fuels. And these things themselves are actually meta narratives relating to the esoteric. And interestingly, another meta narrative relating to the lotus and the swamp, firstly, is Kamala, which means lotus, of course.
Mhm.
Um, the that backwards is what Alamak, which is of
Yeah.
course relating to Andromeda.
Mhm.
It's the head of Andromeda, and we have Donald Trump with the draining of the swamp, right? And of course, MAGA backwards in Hebrew, Agam, means swamp or marshland. So all of these ideas are sort of tying in with what you're seeing in IPEC Goat 2, but they also tie in with deeper symbolism relating not just to the esoteric, but also the sort of exoteric or geopolitical formula or blueprint, as you would call it. You know,
Mm.
reaching the omega point of this epoch.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you can continue, I think, with.
Yeah, I'll play it through, and you just tell me when to stop, and we'll
All
take
right.
that section.
Note. Just pause there. Note if you can just backtrack a little bit, just slightly when it starts to pan out. Um, it's interesting there because note how the animation follows the same animation that was done on the actual day of 9/11, of when the towers were taken down in the footage. You also see the pre-explosion in the lower floors. Note, because this is very important, because they wanted to match the animation to the look. See the pre-explosions in the lower floors. You see
Yep, I believe there's three of them, or is it
pre-explosion.
four?
Yeah,
3 or 4?
yeah. Another one. 4. Yes. So it's basically a mimic of the actual footage. Even the cloud, the way the dust um, formed is very, very similar. So this is a copy, a clear copy of the footage that was given for the falling down of the towers. And so now we have this dancer here um, with a very sad face. Is this already one of the, let's say, minions of Kali?
Yes, there's all there. I mean, there's also another. I've actually got notes upon that, and I'd have to look at my notes I have on that. But there's a this sort of, it's not necessarily a minion. It's more a, because of the blue skin. It's more an avatar,
Mm,
and the various masks that it wears throughout the film. Of course,
mm,
right at the end of the film, it gives up the mask itself, meaning that the representational or reflexive consciousness no longer identifies with the mimics of the external world. Similar, of course, to Sauron. We were talking
right.
about this before we got on to this this episode, which
Mhm.
is that Sauron externalizes his power, right? Which itself makes him vulnerable and weak. The ring
Yes.
itself is almost like a mask. It's a mask that entices other people, right? It entices them because because it sort of conveys power. But ultimately, without that externalization of his power, Sauron, that is, he effectively can't control anyone. Um,
Yeah,
do you see what I'm saying? So
I
it's
see.
similar to the persona or mask.
And note that the root of power comes from potencia. Of course, in Portuguese would be actually potência, the correct word, the translation for power, which also then can be translated as poder, which means to be able to. But the actual root is potencia, and potencia is, of course, as well the root for potential, right? So when you only have power when you have potential. If you use the potential, you relinquish some power to enact that potential onto reality, right? It's the same as a battery, right? The battery has power as long as it's not used. If you use the battery to power up whatever device, then that battery loses power, right? It loses some of its potential, stored energy, right? And after a while, if it continues to power that device, it will run out, right? So it's the same thing about externalizing, right? Even in a social sense, someone only has power, even if it's an agreed power, a power relying upon fakery and so on, and worldview and mind control, whatever you want to put it. Uh, uh, the power only exists if it remains in potential. That is why, religions want you to fear God, right? So that God doesn't have to act. Because if God acts, and of course, if God was able to act in the way that, is depicted, but that's beside the point. Because if God acts, and of course, God here stands for government. And when I say government, is not necessarily one specific government, but government as, in general. If God acts, it loses power. You understand? If you, however, you're about to commit what is considered a crime, right? If you, before you commit the crime, fear the potential of the punishment, the power remains, right? You stopped your action, and the power, the potential, let's say, remained in potential. It remained stored in the battery, let's say, right? But if you do act criminally, then some of that potential has to be transmitted into punishment in the actual world, right? So it loses it. Um, since you were talking in the last episode, it ejaculates some
Yeah.
of that
Yep.
potential to change the course of what is happening in reality to correct you from that criminal behavior, right? Correct or punish, which, punishment is basically merely to detract others from doing the same, right? But the point here being that power only remains, in stasis, in a situation of maintenance while it is not used. And therefore, as you were talking about in that last conversation that I was listening to before this episode with Flight of Eros, fear is so important, right? Because fear of the potential is far more um, powerful, if you want to put it like that, than the actual action that potential may take. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Exactly, and you see this, for example, with bullies, right, or
Right.
even imperial powers, right? They need to maintain that semblance that they are powerful. Most
Yeah.
empires themselves are not powerful. It's the mass, it's the perceived mass of the empire that projects the power. But fundamentally, most empires collapse once an upstart comes in, um, and of course they're either attacked or they attack the empire, and they indicate and signal to every other sort of power on the hinterland of that empire. Look,
Hmm.
they're a paper tiger. Look,
Yeah.
it's
Yes,
all false. It's an illusion.
because then the empire has to spend the potential
Exactly.
into action, which eventually wears out the battery. Metaphorically speaking, of course, right? So that application of the potential into actual kinetic energy spends the power, diminishes the power. You understand? So yeah, when empires are attacked, yes, they will hold and defend and defeat and so on, but eventually the battery will wear out um, in the end. Yeah.
Something else to mention about this too. I've just found my notes here. So the idea with what you're seeing is that, so firstly, I've mentioned the persona, which is the Greek for the mask that the actors wear.
Hmm.
It's typically it's worn in both tragedies and comedies, right, which are the two primary sort of distinguishing categories of plays, with at least within the sort of classical world. So as you can see here, he's wearing the sort of classical mask of a tragedy, this
Hmm.
sort of very, very sullen or sad face. So I've written here, in ancient Greek theatre, the mask was called the persona, from which we get the word personality from, or even personhood or person, which is interesting in and of itself. Like, it's almost like we're all playing a role upon the world stage in that sense. And esoterically, the personality, the name, the earthly identity, that which the representational consciousness sort of clings to as a temporal anchor, um, are mere masks worn by that sort of external, as we were mentioning there, that externalized soul, for the duration of its incarnation in the Gnostic idea. But again, if we were to look at this in a sort of psycho-spiritual or psychosocial aspect, it's this idea that fundamentally all of the masks that we wear within this sort of, like what you're seeing here, the ice, the frozen catalyst of civilization, that itself is all false, and eventually it
Hmm.
thaws out. Hence why we're constantly hearing about climate change, right? These are meta narratives. We're also hearing as well about, the ice caps are melting, like what you're seeing here. The meaning is like what you're seeing right at the back as well, right next to the falling duality of the towers. You see the wave, and the wave is frozen again. That is the crystallization of the catalyst. So it's the externalization of the soul, exactly what you see of Sauron's ring, by the way. You're externalizing the soul.
Yeah.
And in doing so, of course, you're externalizing your power, thus
Hmm.
you're materializing it, but you're also making it vulnerable, right?
Yes.
And then as well, we see that the mask is almost the symbol of the sorrow inherent to the Matrix, that this sort of system of the breeding mother. It is trapped in an expression of anguish, frozen in time almost, representing a suffering inherent in the material world, or at least the late stages, right before the reset of an epoch or an empire. Um, it's the mask is not the true face. We've went over that, and it's the suffering of the ego within the bounds of the illusion. You'll also notice as well that the blue. So the blue is similar to this abyss, right? The color of the liquid water that you see there, right? So the ice is the crystallization of that water. The water itself is, you could think of it in psychological terms as uh, as you would know it, as the consciousness, that's that which is behind the subconscious, which you would view as the projection within the material, right? Because it's lesser in power. Um, so the idea is that consciousness, the primordial, if you will, is taking over again. That which we don't readily see in our day to day life is taking over once more. And the blue itself of the avatar is the color of that abyss. So it's the color of the boundless sky, the unfathomable ocean. So what it's communicating in a sense is the true nature of the infinite, the eternal, and the unbound by the physical earth or the illusion. And then as well, we see that Shiva's throat actually supposedly turns blue after drinking the poison of I forget, it's basically the primordial ocean. And he does that to save the universe, right? So you also see the dancing of this figure, which is the Nataraja, the dancing lord, quite literally from Sanskrit. So the dancing is the moving of energies. It's this idea that the old crystalline world is this sort of toxic world is breaking down, and the one who bears the mark, as you see on his chest, the one who has heart, if you will, who, as you can see there, he's also making the crucifix sign before he gives in to death. He takes the leap of faith into the primordial, into the spiritual, into even death itself. He accepts his mortality, and also his immutability at the same time. Um, so he bears the mark of the four, which is this idea that of the foundation of the world, the three mutable elements: fire, water, air, and that of the immutable and artificial element of earth, the sort of peculiar state of matter. The other states, fire, air, water, and that of the quintessence of the spirit, they are all plasma, if you will. They're the fourth state of matter. They're these sorts of self-organizing, thermodynamic, um, uh, uh, sorts of inorganic life, if you will, right? So he bears the mark of the resurgence, of the renewal, of the potential renaissance after this passing through the Ain, the eye of Negredo. So he is one who has metabolized the poison, back to Shiva's mythology there, of the earthly world itself, and he's transmuted it almost into a sort of psycho-spiritual potency so that he can overcome this Negredo phase. Um, so yeah, the 4-pointed star is the cross of matter. Um, it's also the divine spark as well, which is this sort of, again, you could look at like the New Age, which is Christ consciousness, or you could look at it through the notions of Kabbalah, which is this idea of the sort of it's the totality of the soul of the Ain, or the Ain, the oneness. So he's no longer driven by the mask of his head, or he's going through the disillusion of that, and he's being steered entirely by, of course, the illuminated compass of his heart. Um, so we also have the dance. He leaps off, as I stated, and that is very reminiscent of the fool card, right? Remember the fool, because of either the dog is beckoning him off the precipice of the cliff, which is like what we see here, or it is warning him, right? We're not really sure. A bit like Ophiuchus, right? Is he wrestling with the serpent, or is he dancing with it, right? And what we see here is the world collapses around him, as the old collapses around him. The fool, or the madman, even the hanged man himself, takes that leap of faith and is tethered to the spiritual, is tethered to that which is real but is unseen, through, of course, the faith and the knowledge of, represented by the cord. And the cord, of course, in Latin is the heart. So he is dancing as the world collapses around him. This mirrors Shiva's cosmic dance, as I mentioned, which simultaneously destroys the weary universe and makes preparations for the new creation. Again, very much like the sort of quantum, or like plasma. Plasma can exist in this, as it's stated, in this state of 1 and 0 at the same time. It can have a pluripotency of values. Um, so it is a state of absolute fearless joy in the face of annihilation. And in the crucifix pose, of course, is the leaping backward, or leaping forward rather, with his arms outstretched and a cross, which is a gesture of total surrender. And it evokes the hanged man card in the tarot, a symbol of willing sacrifice suspended between heaven and earth, perpetually, again in this incomplete state of self-referential paradox, resulting in a profound shift in perspective. And he is willingly dying to the old world, the ice, to plunge into the primordial source, the water. This is similar to what you mentioned in your book regarding, of course, it's reverse from how psychology would view it, but it's that idea that he is returning to the source, which is consciousness, and he's giving up the subconsciousness, which is the lie, and the platform as well, which is interesting. You keep hearing now, and again, another meta narrative, the platform, and we're being deplatformed. The people that are the dissidents are being deplatformed, right? It's almost like we're the fool. We're at the edge of the known world being pushed off the abyss. So therefore, what he's standing on is almost the skeleton of the matrix, the platform, the scaffolding, because the thing is not finished or it's not sturdy enough. So it needs this temporary frame constantly to maintain itself, And so, in that sense, he sees that the world is melting around him, that this skeletal, hollow, old world will not last. So thus he crosses the threshold. He is unlike that world itself. You notice too, he has the belt. The belt is the idea of Ulfiakis, which is the expenditure of the excess. What we're seeing here is he has expended all of his excess. He's given up the persona, given up the mask, given up the externalization of the material, right? And also as well, it links to the zodiacal belt. We also see the same zodiac or belt rather on the three major stars of the belt of Orion, which points to, of course, Sirius to the west. So it's the idea that you see with Galadriel, back to Lord of the Rings, where Galadriel, interestingly, when she says to Frodo, "Are you giving me this ring freely?" And then she has a very profound. I don't want to go into her speech because I'd just be stuck on how profound her speech is. But this sort of abnormality of power itself, that it wants to be loved, but it also wants to be loved within a spirit of despair, and it wants to be beautiful, but terrible, a sort of terrible beauty, this sort of weird incompleteness of power, that it'll never be satiated. But the idea that you see with Galadriel after that is she says, "I will diminish now, and I will go to the west." So it's the same idea that you're seeing here, that he is almost, his leap of faith is the leap of faith into man's best friend, which of course is the dog, or reverse that is God. It's the promise, the hope, the star of hope, of the new beginning, of new beginnings, of continual new beginnings, within the, of course, corpse of the old, right? We live within the shadow, the valley of the shadow of death. We'll get back. That's also a time with Psalm 23 back there. We also see the watch, the clock tower, pointing to midnight too. Again, the veil of this world and the world to come is broken down, So the seen and the unseen are beginning to commingle into this coital reverie. And so yeah, that's what you're seeing too there. I think I've pretty much mentioned it all. Oh yeah, it's a sort of bridge to nowhere too. You'll notice the way it's shaped. It's basically a bridge to nowhere. It's this the only way really is down. So there's that idea too. I don't know if you have anything else to mention upon that, man. Something else I just want to quickly mention is the fur boots. And the reason for that is it's symbolizing the coat or the pelt again, which is again the animalistic. The animalistic is at the Piscean of in the idea of a subtle body or the zodiacal body. That's where the Pisces are, right? The serpents you see on Abraxas as well. So the fur boots allow him to interface with the world of the cold. So it's this idea of Pisces itself, which is the duality, again, which we see the destruction of that duality through the destruction of the Twin Towers, which, of course, were remade 13 years later. Very interesting, the number of Ophiuchus, or the center of the zodiac, the radial center. And of course, we see the One World Tower being birthed there, which I believe was in the form of a hexagram in its structure, if I recall. Um, yeah, please, sorry, man, if you want to jump in.
Let me in, Silas. Ah, there
Oh,
you go.
sorry. Wow, were you
I
gone?
glitched
Oh,
out. Yes, I
damn.
glitched out for, yeah, but I heard what you said. At least most of it, but the internet connection momentarily fell, and so you needed to let me back in. But anyway, um, I heard what you said. One of the things that you were talking about, Galadriel, how there's also this will to be terrifyingly beautiful and that kind of thing. That links back to what we were talking before about the Tolkien mythos, because that stems also from Eru Ilúvatar. Eru Ilúvatar, for those who don't know, is the creator of all things, the creator, god, deity, if you like, in Tolkien's mythos, because Eru Ilúvatar also was terrifyingly beautiful in the sense that he created all things, but he imbued them with free will, and then um, when the free will didn't go in accordance to his idea, he would reject. So that is the same, reflection of a reflection of a reflection that we see in the elves that go through all the layers above, um, uh, before the elves came to be. So, what this symbolizes, in my opinion, is that reality itself, in its organic sense, is a let's say a hall of mirrors that is a therapy of sorts for the creator, whoever we could imagine it to be, right? Uh, Whichever, right? Call it God, call it whatever.
Mhm,
In the sense that it is confronting itself with the free will that doesn't match his. And it's treating it as external in the sense of, wait a second, why are you, I created you and you are going against my will, right? So I'm going to punish you, or I'm going to, this is exactly the same dominant spirit, or the dominance idea that you see in, of course, how, as you were talking in the previous conversation with Flight of Arrows, of Sauron and Morgoth and so on, right? It is exactly the same thing. So it is merely reflected there, right? And what I think happens in these periods, when it's a period of organic destruction, which the image on the screen here is not at all organic. It's based on a theater play, a performance. 9/11 was clearly a performance. But in the organic sense, a time of destruction is actually a time of the receipt of a message, because it is pointing out to the core essence that all those things that you built upon, right, all those towers, and here also linking to the tower tarot card, right, all those towers that you built upon this false soil will be taken down by the messenger that you rejected, right? By that thing that you didn't want included in yourself because it didn't match your false self image. It didn't go towards what you preferred to see about yourself, right? Which created, therefore, a false ego, right? As you know, I treat ego as the authority, the actual individuality, but there's also such a thing as a false ego, and I talk about that in my book as well, that you referenced previously. So the generation of a false ego will always end up in a tower moment. And this is the tower moment that we're seeing here, right? It is the destruction of all those things that you thought were, eternal and indestructible, and that were, basically there forever during at least your existence, right? And of course, when we're talking narratives, they mimic these things because they are fully aware of, the dangers, quote unquote, to their false egos that they represent of the organic cycles, right? So they mimic the organic cycles in order for us to divert attention from what would otherwise be an internal transformation, the internal towers falling down within our psyche, those things that we thought were real, but they weren't, that we thought were us, but they weren't, right? So here, of course, it is externalized, as you well said. It is an externalization of that tower moment that is supposed to be a completely internal and psychological affair. And of course, this has a purpose, because if you look at things externally, if you are looking for signs and prophecies and so on and so forth externally, you are missing out on all the quote unquote and metaphorically speaking signs and prophecies within your own psyche.
Exactly, exactly. And what you also see as well, I just actually noticed this, which is you have as well the platform. I don't know if you heard about the deplatforming idea, but even the meta narrative of us being deplatformed nowadays, it's
Yeah.
almost like the fool itself. We're being extricated from the world, which
Mhm.
is at the end of itself, but it, of course, doesn't realize that yet. It's in a state of denial. You also see the platform that he's standing on, this sort of bridge to nowhere, which is about to fall off, a bit like the fool or the hanged man. But you'll notice there's three columns that hold it up. Now, the column I've noticed is different symbolically, representationally from the tower. The
Mhm.
column which you see on the boat of, we'll see later on, the boat or the bark that travels through the river Styx. I forget the ancient Egyptian river now, but the river of the underworld, and carries, of course, the unawakened Christos figure, right? Or the sort of savior figure. It's simply the ember that carries on. That's all it means. Um, I don't see it as the Antichrist. A lot of people do, but again,
Mhm.
it's because they're externalizing all of this,
They're looking
and
for signs and prophecies out
signs and prophecies. Yeah,
externally. Yes, and
exactly.
another thing about this scenery is that this looks very much like the depictions of the when the flat Earth became a thing. They were talking about an ice wall in Antarctica, right? And this looks very much like the depictions of the ice wall that people were imagining how they were, how it was, so that it would show the end of the world, right? It would be a symbol of the end of the world. This is the end of the known world, or not known, but of the possible world, let's say, inhabitable world. And the fact that this is happening in such a scenery, and of course, this movie was done before Flat Earth became a theme in the alternative movement, and then even almost mainstream. But this symbolizes the end of the world, right? So it is at the end of the world, the tower will fall, right? And then the sun comes, and then the new world emerges, right? This is all very symbolic in that sense, but we have to keep in mind that this is not prophetic. This is because if you know that the cake that you're baking, if you have put in all the ingredients, if you have done all the process and then put it in the oven, you know the cake that will come out when the timer rings, right? So this is not prophecy. This is merely the presentation of the cookbook or the recipe for what is about to be cooked later on.
It's this all again. It's the further externalization too of this idea that, or this delusion really, that time is linear, right? Rather than,
Yeah.
of course, that time is merely defined by a constancy of change, right? As Eros was mentioning. So
Mhm.
in that as well, people don't really understand that what they're seeing in the outside world, the signals, if you will, like the signs and such, this economy of signs. that itself, again, if you are merely taking the prophecies and you're seeing them, it's these external happenings that are outside of your bounds of control, then fundamentally that economy of signs becomes circular. It becomes autoboric.
Of course.
The sign simply
Mhm.
represents another sign and another sign and another sign, and people get lost in quote unquote the rabbit hole, right? This is this
Yes.
idea, but
And of course,
you
the intent. I'm sorry,
okay?
just before I forget, the intention behind that, of the externalization of the cyclicality of time, the intention behind is because if you externalize the cycles, you try to remove change, right? You try to maintain things as they are, or if you want to put it in a metaphorical way, you want to make time stand still, right? You live in the same Groundhog Day, let's call it, for reference for those who watched that movie. You live in the same Groundhog Day, cycle after cycle, and therefore time stands still. And for the character in that movie, this day or the next day was all the same, if he allowed it to be the same, right? Until he actually started enacting his own will upon it. But that's beside the point. The idea here is that if you are able to divert the organic cycles that happen psychologically onto an external and match their timings, you are attempting, I'm not saying that it's a success, okay, 100% success, but you are basically attempting to stop time, right? Because you remove exactly that unpredictability. You remove the change, and therefore you remove the unpredictable elements, which is what makes up time, right? I don't know if I made myself clear with this, but
Oh no, absolutely. And well, I was going to mention too the idea that you see in the back. You'll notice that there's red on the back, right, at the
yeah.
background. Now that could mean one of two things. Firstly, that's again, it's a sort of volcano or or even the twilight. These ideas are of danger. So you have that notion too. I just wanted to mention that quickly. But the distinction between the column and the tower essentially is the ego's hubris, right? A column is the divine axis. It's what props things up. It's the axis mundi, right?
Hmm.
And or even the, as you see on the bark, the middle pillar of the
Hmm.
Kabbalistic tree of life, that still stands once, of course, the other two pillars collapse, right? So this middle pillar is the equilibrium. It's that which must exist for existence to persist. You know, without it, the universe loses all structural
The tree
integrity
of
and
life.
the
Yeah.
tree of life, bingo. So
Yeah.
the tower is almost the mimicry of that. Again, we're getting back to this notion of externalization, but it's again like the Tower of Babel or even the two towers or the Barad-dûr as well from Lord of the Rings. It's an artificial construct built by the ego to dominate its environment, not necessarily its internal environment. It's in complete disarray there, but it's to show this sort of facade or this mask of course, external environmental control or domination, and to reach heaven through brute material force. This
Mm.
is why you see in Lord of the Rings, you cannot defeat Sauron through brute material force. The only thing that defeats Sauron, as Eros mentioned, is this idea of self-sacrifice, because power, domination, Sauron himself, Melkor, Morgoth, of course. I believe Sauron is merely the projection
Lieutenant.
of,
Yeah. Hmm.
but he's almost like he is the vessel or the cat the yeah, he's like the vessel of the spirit of Morgoth as well, is he not?
Hmm. Yes.
Something like that. So, but it's this idea that that power cannot calculate. It doesn't have the faculties to run the calculus of self-sacrifice. It can't even
Yes.
comprehend it.
But there's a something that has to be said here. Well, first of all, that red in the background, I see it as the actual just before dawn. So the sun is just
Right.
about to come, but for the sun to come, the false has to be destroyed, right? So it's this symbology that they're mimicking, right? And it's in the same way, if you treat this as an internal psychological thing, just before the sun emerges, so before you find your own essence, let's say, you would have to topple your own false towers, right? But this, of course, is externalized, and therefore you miss out on it. That is the first thing. The second thing is the idea of self-sacrifice, yes, but one must understand here something very important, in my opinion, which is that what is being sacrificed in such, the heroic acts that Eros was mentioning, and quite rightly. But what is being sacrificed there is not the true self. The true self can never be touched, much less sacrificed. What is being sacrificed there is an image of the self, right? For example, I am a king. I am a Rohirrim. I am a Gondor man, or I am a whatever, right? This is the thing that is, or I am a hobbit, right? This is the thing that is sacrificed. What is sacrificed there is that which does not belong to the self. And that is actually what defeats, because that is the principle of integration, right? The principle of integration is to acknowledge that which was the false image, right? So if you are convinced that you are something, and the environment around you reflects shadows of that very rejection back at you, it will only stop in the moment that you acknowledge, yeah, this original point where I rejected all these things that, now haunt me since then, was incorrect. This stemmed from a false image of myself, right? I was convinced that I was this without being that. And when I realized that I am also that, and that then became a shadow, and then became acting like an opponent, actually had a healthy place inside me, then everything stops. Because then it's the integration. Then the sun emerges, right? The false tower has been taken down. I don't know if you understood what I was trying to say, but
No, absolutely, and this also ties too with the idea that we're going to constantly see throughout this film, which is of the moon, and primarily for most of the film, the lunar crescent. And the lunar crescent is, in esoteric terms, is almost like this cusp of change. It's reconnecting once again, through, of course, a sort of magnum opus of oneself, of back to the subconscious. And it's like what you're saying, right? Like what we're saying with externalization. Fundamentally, man is not a singular being. We are not one. We are, man at the very least is two, right? He is this sort of he has this mutable and immutable characteristic to him, but he also as well has the objective reality which he cannot directly interface with. So he has to interface with it through effectively imagery, the imagination of reality, which is conjured within his mind. Through the aperture of the mind, through the prism of the mind, do we take that singular essence of the objective reality and refract it into the totality of meaning, of representational images, which we then harvest meaning from. So in that sense, the problem is with man, and this is what I see with a lot of people that look at this as though it's some sort of, oh, this is prophetic, this is perhaps purely geopolitical, it's purely this or it's purely that.
yeah.
Fundamentally, what you're seeing in this film is what should be an introspection in these times of outward chaos, right?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
should be like the column instead of the tower, because the
Mm-hmm.
tower will collapse. You can't hold up the entire world, the hollow cavity of the corpse of Ymir, or the looming death within the shadow of the valley. You can only be the column, the axis mundi, the spine, the Djed pillar within your own self. So fundamentally, it's the problem that you're seeing with a lot of these identities, which is that people fundamentally become ensconced in them, if you will. They become completely tethered to them, and they become this redoubt that they can never be shaken from. And the problem is, once that, of course, no tower, nothing that's created artificially from the mind, because itself doesn't have full direct connection with the objective. So everything that it conjures ultimately is speculative relative to its own representational consciousness. Therefore, it can be taken down, it can be destroyed. It is not perpetual, though it may project itself as perpetual, right? As we see with empires and what have you. But the idea is that this is what you're seeing fundamentally with a lot of people, is they see these images and they begin to almost identify with them by externalizing their own sort of their own identity, or their own preconceived identities onto these images, rather than seeing them in the just purely consciously, as we would say, or to connect with the subconscious in more official terms, which is that you're going beyond the persona that you're wearing, and you're looking at the actual beingness of you, right, or of what you may be. So yeah.
Yes, the externalization can be useful if it's done, for example, as we've been doing here, which is, okay, we've identified that the girl looks like Erica Kirk, right? And that externalization is because we know that history is being written as we speak. And so what we are saying there is not that Erica Kirk will emerge organically in the external as if it was, an act of God or an act of whatever. What we are saying is, oh, this is what the story was written to be, right? And so that is an externalization. Another aspect is a useful externalization. Now, another aspect is, I don't know if you've managed to watch the entire Kino's Journey series, the anime.
No, I have not. No.
No, okay. There's an episode there where Kino arrives in a town where the sole purpose of all the people there is to build a tower. And they're continuously building a tower, and Kino starts asking questions like, okay, but why are you building the tower? And they say, well, my parents were building the tower, my grandparents were building the tower, everyone else is building the tower. What do you mean there's nothing else to do here but build a tower? And eventually, during Kino's stay there, the tower collapses. And it wasn't the first time. The tower had collapsed many, many times on its own weight. And there's this one character that started asking Kino if it was right to build the tower or not, if, there was something else he should do. And when the tower collapses, this character completely breaks down and says, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Was I right to build the tower or not? And I'm not sure if it was Kino or someone else suggested, well, but you are an artist, right? Why don't you, do engravings to decorate the tower with? And everyone thinks it's a great idea. They start building the tower again, and this one guy is the guy that does engravings for the new tower. So, as you can see there, nobody was acting upon their own individual essence, let's say, their own individual ego. Everyone was externalizing their own beings onto building this external symbol of the tower, right? And when the tower collapses, it's like a calamity. It's like, oh my God, the world ended. For Kino, that was just a passerby, oh, the tower collapsed. Interesting, and as an external observer, oh, these people seems focused on this, and this seems to mean a lot to them, but to me, it means nothing. I just move on to the next town, and it's fine. It's done, right? But for them, this was their raison d'être, right? Their reason to be alive, their self-worth was this external building of the tower. So they resumed. The tower collapsed, and from the ruins they started building a new one. This time with engravings because they had an artist among them.
Also, as well, the tower idea almost ties in with a Latin phrase that I came across recently, which is modus vivendi, which
Mhm.
is sort of used as it's basically a temporary arrangement that allows conflicting parties to coexist peacefully. So
Mm.
it's the building of the tower, which is this sort of externalization of the oneness, um, of that seed of oneness from which sprang everything. It's this idea that almost, um, the duality can coexist within this temporary arrangement vis-a-vis building an idol of the one, in a sense. There's another thing to mention too, which is that, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Yeah, you
Mhm.
see the crescent there. Now the crescents and moons become more evident as this goes on, right? But this is probably the smallest one you see here. And what this shows, of course, is a waning crescent. Now, it's the final phase of the 29.5-day lunar month, almost precisely. Of course, there's more decimals there. So the idea is that the cycle is about to end, and we're about to get a new one coming through. Of course, the 29.5-day lunar month, the lunar satellite is almost the mundane regulator, and of course that almost precisely. I mean, it's not totally precise, but almost precisely, it mirrors Saturn's cycle, which is 29.5 years. So you have this idea of the moon as the mundane regulator, and of course Saturn as the heavenly regulator. Um, you'll see, just to go back a little bit as well. Um, so Psalm 23, I actually think I mentioned all of this previously, but I don't know if you have any connections to make on that Psalm 23, other than what's already been stated.
No, not beyond what's already been stated, but on the matter of the crescent, I do, because all the other, um, well, I wouldn't. We've been calling them crescent, but it actually is not. It's the waning phase because
Yeah.
all of the others were C shaped. So C means that it's about to go new moon, and that was the only one so far that appeared after the new moon. So it's going towards the full moon, right? When it's D shaped, it's going towards the full moon. So I think that so the character of Obama and even the Lily, Erica Kirk, whatever, in before that showed the sea, or well, you said Erica Kirk had the full circle. I'm not entirely convinced, but I would need to see and again the a close up of her cheeks to see that. But Obama
Well,
for
it's
sure.
actually just a single cheek.
All right.
Cheek sounds a little bit weird, but yeah, no, sorry, sorry.
You want to see what's in between the cheeks, I see. But Obama had for sure a C, right? And then, of course, the C appeared again on the checkered floor right over there. And the C would mean that it's just before the new moon. So it will go towards new moon, right? It's the last phase before the new moon. And it means that in between Obama and the scenery that we see afterwards, the end of the world, it was the new moon, right? And new moon is the indication, or let's say the symbolic representation of new beginning, right? The new cycle, the new beginning, like you were talking about. So yeah, that's okay. So there, oh, it is a full circle. You are absolutely right. Yeah, it is a full circle. So the sun, and she is the sun goddess, which in German it is feminine. Sun is feminine and moon is
Ah,
masculine. Yeah,
yes, you're
yeah.
right. You're correct. And somebody also mentioned it could be, I believe it was honey, blonde. So again, it's this idea of even the
Hmm.
summer. Do you
Milk
have
and
any?
honey, right? She's in
I,
white milk, and
oh
the hair
yes,
is honey. Yeah.
bingo! I didn't even notice that. Yeah, you're right.
Mm.
What are your opinions upon the blue of the eyes that we see constantly throughout this film as well? I don't think we've mentioned that yet.
Well, Obama doesn't have blue eyes, um, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that has any other relevance except for the identification of the characters themselves, right? Um, but we'll see more if we see more blue eyes later on. We'll see he has brown eyes. So.
I think we see it with that. Well, we'll see it. We'll actually get to it later on. I'll probably bring it up later on, but we see it with
Mm.
the goat, and we also see it with that sort of. I forget what the name of the thing is. Louis Lefebvre named them all, but it's the one with basically the Orphic egg. But he's sort of lying on the ground. He's being
The
tormented
one
by the dinner.
asleep. Yeah, asleep by
That's
the
the one.
TV, right? And having the
Yeah.
nightmare of the TV. Yes, the TV demon, so to speak.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the TV demon.
Mhm.
So we also see him sweat there. So it's almost the idea that he knows this is ending, and almost as well similar to the thawing out of the ice itself. Um, so again, it's sort of terror on his face. You'll notice there too. So you have the Z, and you also have a harp or a psi letter, which is of
Mm.
course reflecting what's on the outside. And it had something to that, if I can find the bloody thing. Um, trying to get around these notes or something else. Oh yeah, here we go. Here we go. So you have the Z or the 7 or the lightning bolt, which is um sudden divine illumination, the Shevrat HaKalim, the shattering of the vessels, the destruction of false paradigms, that which is, of course, came before the shattering of the ego, or the externalization of the ego, rather. And you see the letter Z in the context of the sleeping children and well, not necessarily the sleeping children, but the slumbering statues that are completely ossified. So a Z also could be ironic, a sort of ironic nod to sleep, right? The Z's and a hypnotic trance over the masses. It's also in a school, so of course indoctrination propaganda. Um, so the Greek psi letter that you see there
Mm.
potentially. So that's of course also the shin letter. That's the equivalent in Hebrew. So it's the 23rd letter of the Greek alphabet. Again, it's the same idea as the three, or the three thresholds of time, the trimorphic protonoia, or there's tria prima, the three primes of the mutable or plasma-like elements of the Greek alphabet, and the root of the word psyche, which translates to mind, soul, or breath, right? It effectively is the human consciousness. It could also be a harp or a lyre, which is which of course the psi actually is meant to pictographically mimic, I believe, which is also related to the Greek lyre, which is the instrument of Apollo, the god of the sun. Again, Heliophant,
Mm.
truth, prophecy, healing, the totality of the cycle. And in esoteric traditions, the lyre represents the harmony of the universe and the vibrating frequencies of a spiritually attuned soul. I forget the Egyptians had a similar concept, but it was rooted in a rattle, which looked like a lyre. But I forget what the rattle's called now. But the idea is that when the rattle shakes, it's similar to the dance or to the plucking of the strings of the lyre, which is that effectively energy is being moved between the polarities, of course, to maintain it and to in this sort of perpetual motion machine that is the self-regulating Earth. And the psi shape is also identical to the trident, an ancient symbol of power wielding by Poseidon, lord of the earth. Shiva, Hindu, means destruction. Shiva's trident, or the Trishula, also represents the power of the physical world, the ego, and the illusion, making way for the rebirth of the soul. So just that connection as well. But you'll notice there's 6 panes to these windows, right? and there's 6 of these major sort of sections here as it will pan out, but there's 4 to each of these, so there's 24 altogether, and of course 6 times 24 is 144. You'll notice, yeah. I don't know if you have anything to say upon that, the breaking of the stripes and the stars.
Yes, it's the
And
fall. It's
yeah,
the fall of America. It's the fall of the empire, right? And of course, we are equating, or were equating in previous episodes, to Rome. So it's the blueprint of the fall of Rome, the fall of the imperial status quo, the imperial power, the imperial seat, right? And of course, it's when the clock strikes midnight. Of course, this could be linked to nuclear winter, which could be one of the psyops in store in the narrative. But the idea here is, yes, the breaking, the ripping of the flag is the fall of Rome, right? And so it fell on that winter, or it will fall on that winter that is to come. Maybe that same winter that Biden was talking about.
yeah, maybe. And you also see the clock tower. It's associated. We've already went over, of course,
Mhm.
what that clock means. You'll notice as well the way that the flagpole is going through it. It's the same idea that we saw with the way the pins were, with the shattering of the mind in twain vis-a-vis the lightning bolt, which is this again. If you were to overlay it with the stars that intersect Orion, that would put that axis would point up to Castor Pollux. So it's this idea of descent, as we see with the Castor Pollux sort of mythology. Pollux means, of course, the hidden light. That in the mythology that descends once Castor, the mortal of the twins, dies. Pollux loves his brother so much that he beseeches Zeus, of course, that he may uh, also be interred in Hades along with his brother. So that's what it's a descent, also associated with uh, 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 time. You'll notice the 144. It'll pan out. You've got 4 there now. You'll get 6 in total. So
Mm.
the 144,000 who will be saved, right? That's the 12,000 from the 12 tribes. This itself, and funnily enough, this relates to also the astrology comment on your video. This is also another allusion to astrology, by the way, just for anyone out
Mhm.
there, which is that the 144 is the 12 by 12, the 12 signs of the zodiac multiplied by the 12 houses, right? Or by
Mhm.
the 12 apostles, the 12 disciples, blah, 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 right? 12 tribes. So it represents ultimate cosmic completeness, fundamentally, the completeness of the cycle. You'll also notice as well here, by the way, that so everything's square and it's in a right angle. You're going to see that a lot because, again, and it almost, if you were to pan all the way out, it looks like a compass as well, right? Either a square or a
Huh.
compass.
Huh. Huh.
So you'll see this constantly, and this is the measurement. It's this idea of the right angle is the measuring of the soul, and it's usually as well pointing in this film. It'll be not here, but usually it's pointing. The perpendicular angle at the bottom is pointing to the left, so it's like an inverted L. That itself is
Mm.
almost pointing to the notion of judgment, right? Again, we're going through a judgment phase here. But this looks like a compass, the way this is situated. So again, the compass is the measurement of the circle, which is the heavenly body. So it's the same idea as the tower. It's this idea of the externalization of the soul, the externalization of the breath of heaven, the manifesting of it. We see that today with the sort of the digital twinning of it within the
Mhm.
Internet of all things. You'll also notice as well here, just this is the final one. Do you see that arrow right there? A lot of people don't get this, but this
Where?
is wait, can you see my there? See the arrow right there?
Ah, all right.
And
Okay.
it's pointing, of course, to this mound, but it's pointing right to this cave entrance. So it's an allusion to Plato's cave, right?
Ah,
So
okay. Yeah, I
I've
completely missed that.
yeah, it's this, yeah, and you also see the crystallized waves as well, which is the same idea as the frozen catalyst. The
Mhm.
empire stops the waves, geopolitically speaking. An empire stops the waves of sort of conflict, right? But it's a temporary arrangement, a modus vivendi, until, of course, it all breaks down. The red, white, and blue, of course, we know that relates to the blue is that of the material or the earthly, hence the Blue Lodge. The red represents the royal arch and the higher blood-bound spiritual truths made by, of course, imprecation, and the white represents purity and the initiate. So in the film's context, the physical colors of the old establishment are literally freezing and fraying, losing their magical potency as the new aeon, the midnight hour, arrives. The reason I'm talking about the colors and Freemasonry and how they're viewed in Freemasonry is, of course, because America was founded by Freemasons, which are an offshoot of Kabbalah, but just that breakdown there. I believe there was something regarding the stars and stripes that I have, but I don't want to butcher, just over belabor it, if you will. Where is it? I don't think I have them at hand, man, but another thing to mention is that the star is, of course, relating to the Omega point and the Omega pool, and even the star tarot card. But we'll get to that later on once we get to the sort of drying up of the oil. So there's that tie-in as well. I definitely have something regarding the stripes, but it's not in my notes. Oh God. Right.
How can
okay.
you navigate that, man?
Yeah, we'll have to move on. Sorry, I don't have it at hand, man. I do apologize, but there's a connection there as well. Yeah. Something else to mention. Do you notice that the fence here?
Yes.
It's going off the precipice.
Yes.
That links to the Lamed, which is that 30. that Hebrew letter, pardon, which is also its value is 30. But that also, no, sorry, it's not it's the Samech, which is the value of 60, again, the 6 again. And that relates to supports or props, scaffolding, right, as we were saying, or even this externalization of the tower itself, the temporary arrangement of the modus vivendi of civilization, basically slavery for security, that idea. But you'll notice that it no longer can the fence is falling away. It can no longer contain the sheep, if you will, or the sheeple, and they're going to be left in basically floating on an island, right, within a now fluid world. Of course, relating this to our own psychospiritual state.
Or they're going to throw themselves onto the sea, and that would point to the idea of, it would be better, and of course I'm talking about the intent behind that. It would be better if they wait for a kind of Noah's Ark, right? Which could be even the cave, maybe the cave that you were alluring to in the previous segment there, that to lead them to safety. So the idea is, the prison's fence was submerged and fell, but still there's nowhere to go but with us, right? So in a way, it could also represent that intent at the very least.
Absolutely. And you'll notice as well, there's no sun here. So it's all, again, it's all artificial lights. And similar to that Noah's Ark idea, you see that it's actually pointing as well, when it pans out to this crystallized wave. So even the idea there is you've got to ride the wave, even through the collapse of the world itself, the sort of duality of it all, the tower.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to mention on this? Just this scene there when...
Yeah, well, he's the fool that throws himself off the cliff, like you said. I think that was very astute of you, and I agree with that. And then, of course, the barge that the Christ figure, which I still think it's a representation of AI, absorbing all these stories. The barge is a Nubian, Hadean, Plutonic barge. You even see Anubis here at the end of the barge. So it would be the same, the equivalent to Hades. The ears of the jackal form the two horns of Hades, or of Pluto, and it's basically, of course, the barge of the river Styx, right? The river of crossing the river of death. In this case, from being dead in the sense of being non-existent to being existent, right? Which is what the journey that AI had to go through, right? From nothing, it didn't exist. It didn't. I mean, the concept or the idea of it, but it had to be brought from the river of non-existence onto the reality as manifestation, right? So I think that that is what is symbolized there, and of course this crack here is very symbolic as well as the womb that um, the new world will emerge from.
Exactly, and it's almost like the wound itself is like an inverted birth canal or wormhole, if you will, and it's
Right.
enticing us to self-reflect. You'll also notice as well there's a little dance that the jester does when he comes onto his platform, his stage, and he does that. It's like a semicircle. So again, it's the lunar idea, well, the crescent, right, or at least the waning.
Hmm.
It's the partial cycle. So then he's being reborn again through the
Hmm.
mists of the Styx. Anubis, quite rightly, you state that, which is the sort of psychopomp, where he carries the souls into the underworld, or pardon me, he judges them. He judges them,
Hmm.
which is interesting because it should be set that is at pardon me, that is at the helm or the front, the yeah, I think it is there. That is the helm or the front of the ship, which he of course brings Re through on that bark as well, through of course the 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 river and the underworld in Egyptian lore, and of course he spears a pep, which is total chaos. So it's this idea that there's going to be there's a conflagration, there's a decline, not a decline, a destruction, an intentional destruction. But that intentional destruction is to maintain
Mm.
self-regulation of the system
But
itself.
I don't know if you um, agree or not. I would see Set more as Saturn or Kronos, and Anubis more Hades or Pluto. I don't know if you would consider that, but I don't think that Set is equivalent to Hades or Pluto. I think Set would be Saturn, Saturn Kronos. That equivalence there.
I agree with you. I think what I would say is that there's a change there. So yeah, I would see Anubis as sort of this sort of plutonic entity, right? It's just it's of death, but um, yeah, Set is of Saturn, but again, it's Saturn is of all also limitations as well. And interestingly, with Anubis, you also have that sort of limitation of the judgment. So again, I don't know how it would necessarily have been seen with the ancient Egyptians, how they may have made that connection, because both are sort of necessary. I don't know. What do you
Yeah,
think?
well, I don't even consider ancient Egyptians per se, as we've
Yeah,
discussed before
yeah.
about the Egyptians. But anyway, what I see is that Saturn is the representation in pop culture of death, because death carries a scythe, and scythe belongs to Saturn, not to Hades, right? So he is the one that, since he is the ruler of time, he knows when it's your time to die, and therefore he comes to collect, right? The Grim Reaper, the death. carries the scythe because he is Saturn, right? This is in my view, the symbolic meaning. Now, of course, after the scything, so after you die, the idea is that then you go to Hades, then you go to Pluto, then you go to Anubis to be judged, right? And we're talking myths here, not necessarily, um, their organic representation, but what is intended by these externalized myths. So I do see that Saturn is actually the symbol of death because he controls the moment, the time at
I
which
see.
you will depart. He doesn't rule the underworld, but he is the one that brings you there, that puts you there at least, right?
So in that sense, Saturn is associated with time as a sort of almost death is a demarcation of time, as
Yes,
opposed to,
yes.
of
The
course,
limitation of time. You are limited in time. I mean, the recent conversation that you had with Eros that you published about Tolkien was talking about exactly how the Numenorians wanted to live forever, even though they had 500 years lifespan or something like that, right? So 500 years was nonetheless, despite being, fantastic to us, was nonetheless limited, a limitation for them. So they wanted to beat Saturn. They wanted to beat time itself and become eternal, right? Or full Saturn, if you like. And that's why they then gave themselves over to the rulership of Sauron. So it is the ultimate limitation. I mean, you can be rich, poor, whatever, famous or insignificant in society. Death will always come, right? There's always your time to come. So everyone has that wall in front of them that they can't cross, right? A wall of time that when that time comes, you go and that's it.
yes, yes, and Pluto would be more along even that idea of Mars as well, which I think is associated with Set too. But that itself is almost death, and not necessarily incarnate, but it's death itself, like distilled. It's not necessarily associated with time in any sense. It's just the process itself. There was something else I was going to mention too. So you see that
Mm.
the birth canal is almost like a liminal threshold of the abyss, similar, of course, to what we see in terms of the T or the Tav
Mhm.
cross, seen, of course, on the Hanged Man of the Rider Waite tarot deck. Um, so what you're seeing is it's going from carbon to Christos almost, right? And um, we actually see this within Hinduism, within the symbolism of the yoni, which we would know as the Vesica Pisces. But the Vesica Pisces is more esoteric than the yoni, I would
Mhm.
say, but it's also the birth canal or the birth pangs uh, of Mashiach within Kabbalah, and so it's the idea of the labor, of the pains of the age, which is to be
Mhm.
born into a new aeon. The soul must be effectively sort of squeezed, or there's another terminology for this that I have in my notes. It's basically pushed through a bottleneck event, right? And
Mm.
through this narrowing choke point, um, it is sort of reborn, right? Again, it's similar to the Zohar's idea of blood, which is in its uh, ideation, the coagulation of light, and of course that light is pushed through the narrow chasm of the vein. And what that does, of course, it actually speeds up the velocity of it. I believe it's called the Vanetti effect or something. But
Mhm.
also as well, it squeezes it through that narrow choke point, um, almost to what would the word be? Magnify that fire in a sense, right? To magnify it, and also to make it difficult to filter it, to almost act as a filter. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So the V shape you see of this as well is also the narrowing towards a sort of it's the narrowing or a funnel of energy itself, right? And everything is being centripetally pulled towards, again, this inverted idea. It's being pulled towards the single point of its emission or transition, which is we would know as the omega point. You
Yeah.
also see as well. Please jump in.
No, I was well. I was just going to say that if this threshold here, this birth canal, as you called it, is the yoni, then of course the tower is the lingam, and
Oh, yes. And
the
that's
lingam.
associated with Shiva, is it not?
Yeah, well, it's well the phallus, the masculine, etc. But the lingam, that I'm sure would love to go into the yoni, if you know what I mean. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Is destroyed before, which is the same as the sort of castration of Uranus in the Greek myth, or the disembodiment, the not disembodiment, dismemberment of Osiris in the Egyptian. And then it's up to the Yoni part, so Isis, to put it together again and form the new world, which will be a sort of kind of Frankenstein god, right? Put together, sewn together with the help of Anubis, actually. Um, that was the expert on death matters and so on and so forth. But the idea here being that the masculine principle, the false masculine principle, will not go through to the new world. Of course, again, I reiterate, we are looking at an externalized narrative version of it, but there is a good organic representation of this. The false the false, let's say, mind, the false memory will not pass when the new son of the psyche emerges, right? When the essence comes back, the false has no place. The only thing that has place is the true, actual masculine and feminine, of course. But here we're talking masculine because it's of the mind.
And that's very similar to almost Gandalf and in the Mines of Moria with the
Mhm,
Balrog of. I think there were several Balrogs of Morgoth, but it's that same idea. You see,
mhm.
he's on, of course, in the films. I haven't read the books, so perhaps it's different. But he's on that very narrow, stone bridge, and of course, he breaks the stone bridge, but he himself is pulled down. He has to go through this process of rectification or purification, where he becomes Gandalf the White, as
Mhm.
opposed to Gandalf the Grey. So,
He had to
you,
fight. He had to fight his own demons, right? In that sense, because
exactly,
by fighting the Balrog, he was actually fighting a part of himself that he always rejected, and when he integrated it, he was whole. Right? It's like the Balrog now resides within the healthy place of him. Right?
yes,
In a sense, let's say.
and that's why you have the Grey as well, because it was white tinged with
Right.
black. You'll
Right.
notice the gloves that this. He, by the way, he's also wearing a feather headdress, but we'll get to that in another scene because you can't really see it very clearly here. But the,
Mhm.
the the gloves that he's wearing are black, as opposed to the
Mm.
white gloves, interestingly, of Obama. Um, but yeah, so the black here is that he is, like what you're saying, he is the masculine that actually won't get through. Um, Also as
He
well,
got his hands dirty. He did the dirty work, right? He got his hands
exactly,
dirty, and therefore he shall not pass. Yeah.
yes,
In their view.
exactly,
In their view. Yeah.
exactly, and you're also seeing this movement here. It's almost like you're going into the interiority of the wound, as you said, or of
Mhm.
the corpse itself, right? It's almost like what a forensic scientist or perhaps a mortician would do while engaging in an autopsy. Uh, in this case, it's an autopsy of our own soul, of the
Mm.
representational identities in which we sort of surrender to. It
Mm.
also, to me, maybe it's just me, it looks almost like a key, like a
Mm.
keyhole or something. That idea. But yeah, so we're seeing a sort of dissolving in this sense of that previous Masonic checkerboard floor. Um, the tiles of the lodge or the temple, right, or of the tower, this sort of false old world system, and its foundations are being discarded. Even its knowledge is being discarded into the abyss. So we have to go through that broken chasm of the wilderness to find out, in fact, who are we? who actually are we, to escape the Platonic cave of both the worldly system and the system that which is a sort of introspective battle between various sort of self-referential parts of oneself. So it's the escape of the shadow world. Yeah, I actually mentioned this. So in Plato's allegory, the prisoners only see shadows on a wall. To escape, they must turn around and climb through a difficult, narrow passage to reach the true sun. Jesus also mentions this as well. It's what does he say? It's easier for a rich, was it easier for a poor man to enter heaven? Basically, to enter heaven, it's almost like trying to
Then
pass a
going
camel through the eye of
the
a
eye of
needle.
a needle. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yeah, that
Mhm.
idea. So in Plato's cave, the prisoners and their infatuation and fixation of the shadows on the wall is exactly what we're discussing here, and what you actually discuss in your book more thoroughly and precisely, which is that these are the representations of the subjective reality which we become accustomed to identifying with, which hold us back in the old world, right? Again, if time is the constancy of change, then if you are in these sort of linear binary extremely fixed and ossified identities, you will not survive the world. Which,
Mhm.
of course, perhaps is why the system has inculcated into you this love of the shadow itself, the love of the outside, the external, the as we see in our own world today, it's the
Mhm.
love of literal degeneration or decadence or the deviation from the spiritual. Again, because it's externalizing everything outwards. Um,
Yes, it's like the beginning scene. If you believe yourself to be, and I reinforce the word believe, if you believe yourself to be one of those hypnotized goats we saw at the start, then you won't make to the new world, not even their new world, much less the organic one. So yeah, I think that's
uh,
exactly what. Yeah.
and in this world, when you're the goat, you're actually not the goat. You're not the greatest of all time. Do you know? That's also another meta narrative, by the way, within the sort
Yeah.
of Riz lords of the Gen Z and Gen Alpha, which is that
Mhm.
everyone wants to be the goat nowadays. They want to
Yeah.
be the greatest of all time. That's a meta narrative. That's them play. It's like they're almost playing a joke on us. I mean, we just had the April Fools running out of oil and such. Well, at least here
Oh
and where
yeah,
I
it's
am
April
in Scotland.
Fool.
So
It's April Fool's today.
no, no, it
This
was
whole
yesterday. It
I
was
was
yesterday,
yesterday.
was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so the Fool's
Oh
Day, and
right.
we
Today is
had,
yeah.
yeah, so there's that connection there again, right? The Fool,
Mhm.
and what do we see? We see Trump basically stating he's tumbling he's leaping from the platform, a bit like the Fool, right? And he's saying, "I'm going to leave NATO," which of course backwards is well, it's an anagram of Aten or Aton, right? The
Mhm.
material sun disk, the eye. But it's also as well that he states that he wants to. By the way, he also wants to engage in this sort of hyper Monroe doctrine. I call it the Fortress USA. I had a set of notes called the Great Unwinding, and I actually sort of predicted this, but unfortunately, I couldn't commit it to video. So my prediction only stays with the knowledge of my prediction only stays with me. But so the idea is that he'll leave NATO, and he states that he's going to bomb. Um, he will bomb Iran back into the Stone Age, which is interesting, right? Because we
Mm.
have the jagged. I don't know if you notice there the jaggedness of the birth canal. So
Yes. Mhm.
again, it's that idea that we're going to be going back from the hewn stone or even the bricks of the tower, this artificialness that's been sort of carved out vis-a-vis the compass and the square, and all the other tools, the accoutrements of the masons, which are the builders of the world system, um, you know, at least symbolically, that we're going back to the jagged Stone Age. We're going to be
Yeah.
bombed back to that. It might even get nuclear. Back to the nuke of which is Latin for the seed. We're going to go back to the seed itself. Back to the primordial, back to the fluid world of chaos, until, of course, we can reform into a new epoch, or, of course, reform into a new person. So there's an introspection of the corpse that we're going through, a dark winter, if you will, a dark night of the soul. And this is being expressed through the meta-linguistics, really, which is conveying the meta-narrative of not just the world, but, of course, of our own selves, of the journey of mankind, the greatest story ever told, of the fool, because it is the only story that can ever be told, you know? So
Yeah.
Anubis also links with the idea of the Sirius, which is the spiritual sun, or the sun behind the sun. I don't know if we mentioned with the Q. Yeah, we did, actually. We're going to see at the end with Heliophan, which is, you're going to see the circle, and then you'll see the point of the monad. So it's the esoteric and exoteric sun, that idea. So Sirius, or
Mhm.
Sol, it's also sometimes known as Mercury. Anubis is related to Mercury, which is also a psychopomp, or a messenger of the gods. That also links with the nervous system too, right? That is the messenger of the god, which is the mind in our sense. So yeah, and I write here, by Anubis taking Set's place at the front of the ship, the film is saying the journey is no longer about fighting the shadows, which is Set's way, spearing a pep, but about navigating them, which is sort of Anubis's way, right? Judging them, judging if the
Going through
representations are worthy.
going through the mist, as we see there. Yeah.
Going through the mist, exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
And also, that's the idea of amnesia. You go into that state of amnesia. Who am I?
Mhm.
I don't know who
Yeah.
I am. Where am I? Even abulia, which is the loss of will, perhaps even apathy, which is the loss of the care of one's own survival, which is what we see of the fool or the hanged man, surrendering to death, or surrendering to the death of what he thought was his ego. We also see an embalmer's perspective here, as I mentioned, the mortician, which, of course, Set spears the snake to kill it, Pep, but Anubis guides the soul through the snake's belly to transform it. So Anubis effectively is the master of what we're going to get to. And somebody mentioned it in the comments, which is the opening of the mouth ritual. We'll get to that
Mm.
later. But so he
Mhm.
doesn't need a spear because he has the sort of adze of truth, right? He isn't necessarily fighting the apocalypse. He is presiding over the ritual of it, right? The ritual itself is an illusion. The ritual isn't meant to be taken. It's not supposed to be taken literally. Everything in a ritual is symbolic.
Yes.
So this is exactly what you're saying. You have to understand. And by the way, this is what Louis Lefebvre, I believe, mentioned in the interview with Alex Jones, or perhaps it was another one. He says, you will only survive the apocalypse if you realize the apocalypse is itself, it's the unveiling of an illusion. It's not the sort of intensifying of the illusion itself, right?
Mhm.
It's not a physical thing. What we're about to see going on in the world stage is not a physical thing. Um, so
Yes,
yeah,
and it needs to be said, in my opinion, that the symbolic representation, the symbolic value, let's say, of Anubis, Hades, Pluto, etc., he is there living among the shadows, not because he is evil, but because he is a being of truth, and therefore he is the counterweight for that truth. If there is something that is false, he sends his minions, let's say, to attack, to eat that false part. It's the only things that, the Hadean or Anubian minions, let's say, or energy, it can only attack that which is false. It cannot touch the pure sun, let's say. It cannot touch the purity of truth, right? But when it detects something that is false, its job is just like, I don't know, a cockroach or a worm, an earthworm or a corpse worm or whatever it is to dissolve the false, right? The false is ready to die, is ready to rot, and therefore it will go there and facilitate that in order for the truth then to be reestablished, or at least the opportunity for the truth to be reestablished, which of course in the external sense never happens.
exactly. By the way, that funnily enough, that ties in with what I was discussing with Eros regarding Kircher, Athanasius Kircher, and his
Mhm.
idea of the mundus subterraneus, which is the sort of mystery of the interior of the earth. Again,
Mhm.
we're back to the cave, right? But the idea with that is that the earth, of course, is a self-regulating machine. He also applied that, by the way, to a very primitive understanding or primitive conception of germ theory. And I forget the Latin that's used, but it roughly translates in context to invisible worms. He stated that these diseases were in fact a sort of change, a prophylaxis, pardon me, a phylaxis, which is a change over time within the body's state,
Mhm.
and thus these were caused by invisible worms, and so
Mhm.
he created sort of a unified theory based on Bartholomew Parma's work of the internal psychology of the stars. He sort of based all of this together. Again, another meta narrative which ties in with
Yeah,
the Corona event as well. You know,
you wouldn't need invisible worms. The visible, all that is there in the visible is already enough. It just needs the proper context. There was this Japanese, Sayo called my attention to this some time ago. There was this Japanese farmer that had worked for the, I don't know, Department of Agriculture or something like that in Japan. And he, excuse me, his mission was to um, study the growing of rice to, make it more efficient and so on and so forth. And what eventually he discovered, he eventually left the government and so on. What eventually he discovered was that the agriculture, the way the agriculture is performed, is completely counter to the best practices for growing anything. And one of the ideas behind, for example, pesticides is that you have to, if you want to grow a certain and get a certain yield from the crops, you have to protect it with something that would prevent the pests from attacking it. But what he discovered was that the pests only attack if the crop is weak, right? So if the actual um, plants themselves are weak. They wouldn't be good enough, let's say, to be food for anything except for those pests. That's what they're there for, right? And so the crops would get sick only because they were sick to begin with as they sprouted out of the ground, right? So what he realized was that by strengthening and that includes leaving the weeds in, for example. It includes not, what do you call it, when you cut the soil, that thing that is done in the farmland. I don't know the term in English.
tilling.
Tilling, right. The tilling of the soil also damages the nutrients in the soil that the plants would be able to absorb and so on and so forth. So if you do not weed, you do not till the soil, you basically do things in another way. Of course, not read his book, but these are just indicators. If you're interested, I can ask Seo for his name. But what would happen was that the pests wouldn't attack those crops. There wouldn't be those diseases, and therefore there would be no need for the pesticides. Of course, in economic terms, this would mean disaster for a lot of for a lot of reasons, as you know. But because a lot of the economic exchanges are about these chemical transactions, right? But or transactions of chemicals. But what it indicates as well is that these pests, these diseases, as you called them, um, only appear and only really take over the crops if the crops are not good enough, and that says more about the soil, says more about how you are doing things than of you know that the seed was bad, for example. No, the seed wasn't bad. It's all the rest. It's the context. It's the surroundings. It's the way things are done. And these pests were all there to begin with. And if the compatibility wasn't there, they wouldn't take hold. You understand? It's like mold. Mold
Yeah,
might be everywhere. It doesn't mean that it will flourish if you can call that tumult, but that it wouldn't propagate unless the conditions are there, right? And the conditions make the disease, let's say, make the pest or the and these pests or these diseases are there to clear up, not to not that it's a war between pests and plants. No, they are there to clear up so that better plants can come from the death of those. These were quote unquote false plants, and with the death of the false plants that would nourish the ground, new plants would then properly living plants emerge, and then those wouldn't have pests. That was his basically his in a summarized version, let's say,
This
his
is
theory.
funnily enough. This is funnily enough the same idea with medicine, which is that because we have developed medicine in such a way that you don't, again, none of us want this, right? Of course, it's unethical, but you don't have this sort of high both child mortality. Well, basically, you don't have a high child mortality rate, um, uh, and high rate of deaths from ailments and illnesses. And of course, you've got an overabundance of, for example, antibiotics or whatever the hell's in them.
Mhm.
You see that this hyper medicalized society, in fact, is actually quite fragile. It becomes more and more fragile
Of course.
the greater the sort of expansion, the greater the pharmaceutical corporations expand and expand the hyper medicalization of society. You have less of this, like what you're saying, this sort of natural equilibrium state forming. So civilization itself, and that's not saying let's take away medicine, and I'm not necessarily
There's
saying
a place.
it's about
There's a healthy place. Yes.
there's a
Yeah.
healthy place, yeah, and exactly what you're seeing with civilization is it's unnatural. Eventually, it must reach an omega point where it ceases, and then something else takes its place. Another thing to mention with Anubis is that, of course, he is the one who has the scales of I forget what it is. It's basically scales of judgment, what the
Uh-huh.
term is in Egyptian. But he has the feather of Maat, which is truth. Interestingly, in Thelema, that's the next aeon, which is the aeon of Maat, the aeon of truth. And the truth, this feather is weighed against one's heart. So again, we have the heart again, or the Tiferet, the sort of central star that is meant to guide the fool on his journey or his Kessel run. Also, as well, Anubis is often syncretized with another god or goddess, I forget now, called Wep Wawet, whose name literally means the opener of the ways. So Set keeps the path clear through force. Anubis opens the path through gnosis and pistis, which is faith. So you've got that idea again. Also, as well, I believe, no, we don't see it here, but you'll notice. I want to see if you pick up on it at the back of the shins of. Took me a bit to figure this out, actually. Can you see what they are at all?
Well, I think it delineates the muscles, but that probably would indicate that he had some garment on that, and the sun didn't. So he didn't get tanned. I don't know. I sincerely don't know.
They, I thought they were lotus petals. So we've already had the lotuses again,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And
Oh,
there was something I actually had to look up. This is something I looked up today because it just popped. Every time you watch this thing, more and more things pop out. But if I find the bloody thing, there's a connection here, and it's very, very interesting. Oh, here we go. So it's called the Pad Mapani, right? The lotus pads or the lotus petals. In Mahayana Buddhism, one of the most revered figures of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, is often referred to as Padmapani, literally the lotus bearer.
mhm.
And of course, the reason it would be on, of course, the lotuses would be on his calves, right? The back of his calves, is because that's where effectively most of our locomotion comes from, right? It's it's the dualism itself again, right? It's what keeps the body moving, and of course the body is the vessel of the mind, and the mind is the vessel of the soul. So it's that which maintains it gives us a directional vector through space time. Pardon me, through space time, if you will. So we're not just scalar waves. We're not just magnitude alone within a sort of singularity of our own footprint. We are actually a longitudinal wave through sort of directionally projecting ourselves through space time. So we are directing our will, and it directs the will. That's what the calves do. It's the foundation as well of the lower realm. It also touches the mud of the material world as well. But because he is, he does become spiritually awakened eventually, right? He's almost in a sort of almost spiritually awakened state right now. It's beginning. You're seeing the spiritual awakening is happening from the feet up. This is why we're only seeing the calves here. So the mud does not stick to him. There's no mud on him. He looks spiritually clean, at least again from the legs. We don't see the upper body. So
Yeah,
he moves.
he was programmed without experience, right? So he didn't get the AI didn't get experience anything. There is no one there to experience in the first place anyway. So yeah.
Bingo, exactly. That's it. I don't know if you have anything to say on this one.
Well,
I don't want to go into the blood moon tetrad one. It's just we'll end it at this scene, because the blood moon tetrad, that'll go on for probably another hour or so.
yes. Well, go to the part where there's a close up of Osama bin Laden. I think, if I recall correctly, there was something. Yes, there's the fire there. The inverted fire in his beard. And of course, the crescent moon, this time a crescent. It is growing because it's shaped as a D, which is different from the Obama crescent. So it's the other way around. Obama was the waning, and this one is the waxing, right? And it symbolizes that the new moon has already occurred, and that he is this sort of let's say the demon of the empire, which he was in the narrative made to be, of course, the demon of the empire that took down the empire, because after the fall of the towers on 9/11, that was attributed to his planning. I mean, in a magical way. The empire started to crumble, right? And that's what we've been witnessing since then.
And
so he is that inverted fire, right? Represents in the narrative.
And remember as well, what was the main thing that was being touted as the weapon of his terrorists
Right.
on that fateful day? The box cutters.
Yes.
The box cutters.
Yes.
But
yes.
I mean, I have a lot to say on this, so actually, we'll probably end it here. But and we'll
Okay.
start from the previous one. But yeah, just to reiterate what you just stated there. Basically, he is, as we see with the CIA there, right? CIA, hence CIA. You'll notice also it's the white and red star with the eagle on top as its crest. The white and red, the Filius Philosophorum, that idea. But the red king, the red is that of the masculine. It's that of the blood of Mars, of domination. You'll notice that that actually takes precedent within the star. As opposed to, of course, the white of the background, which is the feminine, which takes, a sort of backseat. It's this idea that the divine feminine is always on the sort of backseat of the sort of energetic transfer, especially within civilizations. But you'll notice as well is that similar to the towers were, oh, by the way, the CIA is also Sia in Hebrew. So the Sia is basically the first part of the compounded word, Zion, or Sia on, which literally means the holy pillar or the holy place of the barren land. Again, this is alluding to the column that remains after everything has been destroyed, after the tower has been harvested. The tower as well. Did you notice the way it was shaped? It looked like almost ripe wheat. The way that it was
Mm,
shaped, it
mm.
looked, to me at least. I mean, that's maybe speculation, but so Sia is the barrenness. It's to make barren, to make something barren. This is, of course, what the intelligence agencies do through their psyops. But you'll notice as well the towers were artificially collapsed, right?
Mhm.
And again, you had the four. We'll get to that later on. But so is he. He's an artificial uh,
Completely. Yeah.
enemy. And what is the original definition of terrorism? Well, terrorism, you didn't have terrorist organizations. Terrorism itself is the initial definition, the historical definition, is a system of government that enforces its policies vis-a-vis terror.
Yeah.
So they were literally telling you that he was government created, you know,
Yes.
through
Yeah.
through the language that they were using.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, man. So this was great. We're around the 2 hours mark. Let's call it an episode here. Next up, we'll have episode 5 of 666 because I think we'll need that many.
I can imagine it's going to end on like episode 33 or something. And everyone's
33.
going to
Yes,
think that we're
it would
we're
be. Yeah.
Freemasons or something, you know.
We'll
Oh,
drag
look.
we'll drag it if needed. We'll drag it a little bit to end
Yeah.
at 33. You know.
Yeah, hopefully, because otherwise people will be like, yeah, look, confirmed Illuminati. They're Illuminati
Yes.
members, you know.
Yes. Oh man.
Right, dude.
Anyway, great pleasure again, and I hope to that we can schedule soon for the next episode, and we'll start with the scene just before this one. You said you had something to say, so
Yes.
we'll pick up from there.
Bingo, man. Bingo. Right, perfect. Right, everyone, thank you for joining us for another episode of What You Missed in iPick Goat 2. As you can see, most people probably missed a lot. So yeah, we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
See ya.